honorable judges and respected audience, a very good morning to you all. So before giving our own introduction, I'd like to start off with a quote that we found in the case itself. Cathay is mired in its stuck-in-the-middle strategy, unable to compete as a discount airline and unable to sustain as a premium brand. Now, what does this statement suggest? This statement suggests that the company is currently in a dilemma regarding its current positioning. And as for us, this is team UIU representing Bangladesh, and today we are here to provide them with some consultancy. Moving on. So this is basically the solution that we are suggesting, a 3S strategy that starts with survive, moves on with succeed, and finally ends with sustain. So what we do is in the survive stage, we suggest them with strategies that ensure the current survival of the firm. In the succeed stage, we intend to move them forward towards the brand's success, and in the sustain stage, we intend to take them forward and ensure sustainability. Moving on. So let me guide you through what we are going to cover through this presentation. First and foremost, we will be discussing about what the current situation is, what exactly is happening. Then we move on with what the problems are regarding the firm. And then in the later part of our presentation, we will be discussing our solution to end the problems that are currently present. Moving on. So the situation overview, as we can see, we are currently dealing with the airline industry where the competition is extremely high with a large number of players with varying prices and so on. We see that the costs, the fixed costs and variable costs associated with the industry are quite high, and the airline industry is filled with opportunities, mostly in the Asian market. Moving on. So from the market insights, we see that by 2037, almost 40% of all the travelers are going to be from the Asian region, meaning that there is a high opportunity in the Asian region that we see. We also see that in the developing countries, the high disposable income is increasing, which means that these people with high disposable incomes will eventually be traveling more, posing new market opportunities as well. So we also see that there is high prospects in the LCC model, which is the low-cost carrier model, and this is an opportunity that the firm might be able to pursue given that the situation is correct. Moving on. So we also see that currently we are dealing with Cathay Dragon, which offers passenger and cargo services. They have been facing a decrease in revenue since 2015, and they have a diversified revenue model, which is Cathay Pacific, who are involved with a lot of different activities together. And we see that the load factor is 84.5%, meaning that the company has a number of loyal customers. This is the statistic from 2016, meaning that they did have a number of loyal customers until 2016. Moving on. So the cost drivers, as we see, we have divided them into micro and macro factors. The micro cost drivers are the fixed and variable costs, the maintaining costs, payroll expenses, security costs, government costs, etc. The macro costs include foreign currency movement, volatile oil prices, the competition, and moving on. So we see that currently the main problem, the effect at this point, is that they are unable to design a proper strategy to tackle the adverse condition. Now, what is causing this ultimate effect? Let us discuss the causes. We see that there is a decrease in the quality of the customer service that they're providing. There have been repeated complaints against the company services, despite the company being one of the top brands in Hong Kong in the industry. They are currently facing severe complaints from the customers. So we see that there is an obvious decrease in the quality that they're providing. And because of this, they have fallen down in several international rankings, which ultimately has affected their brand reputation severely. They have also initiated a hedging strategy, which actually led to very severe loss for the firm. It was done in 2015 for a period of 4 years, which means that the hedging period will possibly end in 2018 itself. We also see that the macroeconomic factors that were mentioned before are hampering the current business operations, and we see that there is a misalignment between the desired positioning and the positioning strategy that they're pursuing, as we discussed at the starting of the presentation. And Because of this, they have decided to downsize a total of 600 employees, which has ultimately resulted in low employee morale among the other employees that they have present, and this has initiated dispute with several employee unions, all of which lead to the ultimate effect that they are unable to design a proper strategy to tackle the adverse condition. Fabia will continue.
Alright, so after we have analyzed all the problems and found out the cause, we can derive the core issue, which is that the sustainability of the firm is being questioned. And the risks are being led from high operating costs of the firm, from changing market conditions, and finally from the poor internal performance of the Cathay Pacific. Moving on. So we need to understand that to make our solution more effective, the 3-year solution that we offered, we need to solve the problems or these key challenges. We'll start with the top right corner, which is reducing operating costs. Now this is extremely important for the company to be sustainable and to operate. So for this, if we can achieve this, then there will be higher revenue, and we have to make sure that the variable costs are being minimized. Next we go for service management. From the case we can understand that the service is not up to the mark. There are problems such as the landing wasn't smooth, or that they are not being able to give blankets, the customers have to ask for it. So the thing is, these service managements do create an impact in customers' mind and can have an adverse effect as well. The brand positioning. The company is wanting to be identified as a premium brand, but they cannot provide the services which are actually backing up their desired positioning. So the brand positioning is a problem. And finally, to survive in the long run, they have to ensure that they are sustainable. Now, according to this grid, we can see that the urgency, the variables urgency and importance. If we see this, we see that the topmost priority, the urgent and most important part is reducing operating costs. And we will start from here, according to our model. Then we can see service management and brand positioning. These are important, but their urgency can be dealt with in the later part. And finally, the importance of sustainability is very high, but their urgency can be altered. Moving, Khatib will continue.
So the big idea that we are proposing is the 3-year strategy comprising of survive, succeed, and sustain. Now, to understand what our proposal is, we need to understand the objectives of each of these phases. See, in the survive stage, we want to tackle the operating costs that are causing the main problem for this company. And then moving on to succeed, we will improve the service quality and uplift the environment of the company and the operations. And in the sustain stage, we will sustain through establishing a brand equity for different customer segments. Now, we have divided the timeline according to the phases, and we will see for survive and succeed, we are taking 2 years each, and for the sustain part, it will be 3 years and will be continued. Moving on. So for the first part, in the survive stage, we will be actually proposing to have a specialized fueling strategy. That is, from the case we see that the hedging that they did for the oil pricing, this was actually an adverse effect for them. So what we are proposing is that they do have hedged supplier and also non-hedged supplier. So for that, when they are going for a long haul flight, they will actually take oil from the hedge supplier only up to the transit point, and after that they will actually gain their oils from the non-hedge suppliers, so they can manage the loss and minimize it. And after that, we are proposing to actually bring out a sister concern. See, this Cathay Pacific is owned by Swire, the mother company is Swire company, so we are proposing to open a sister concern, that is Swire Maintenance. Cathay has been doing a lot of activities, development activities in Hong Kong airport, and has a memorandum of understanding with Hong Kong airport. So the Swire Maintenance will work as the main organization to provide maintenance to all the airlines incoming Hong Kong airport. So to provide maintenance support to Hong Kong airport, this concern will be working. And the main objective of this concern is not to gain profit, but to actually meet the break-even point, so that these operation costs of Swire Maintenance will be gained through the revenue of providing maintenance to other airlines, and one of the cost drivers of Cathay Pacific, the maintenance cost, will be free when I take maintenance from my own sister concern. So we are using economies of scope, free maintenance for Cathay Pacific, and we will provide maintenance support to other airlines coming into Hong Kong airports and gain revenue from them. That revenue will be used to actually facilitate the operating costs of this concern. And also we are proposing to split the economy class of our airline, because we want to actually give a premium outlook, premium service to our customers, but we are failing to do so. We need to be cost effective. So we are splitting it in Economy XL and Economy itself, so that the customers have options to look into. That, see, if I want to go Economy XL, there are 9-seater row, enough spaces for you, you can take that. And also we will have half of economy classes where 10-seater row, and you have the option to choose from it. So you can take more premium and less premium, and that depends on whatever your budget is. And in this phase, we are actually initiating R&D for the crew credit system, that is the CCS, and this will be initiated in the second phase. Moving on. So in the succeed phase, you need to understand what is this crew credit system. It is something similar to what China is implementing, the social credit system. See, in the crew credit system, we see that from the case, there has been a huge number of layoffs, but this is something unsustainable for the morale of the company. So there should be a crew credit system with proper performance ratings, given set criteria, and on-duty extensive monitoring. And this will be actually implemented after the R&D we did in the first phase. And thus, the quarterly appraisals will be given to the crews, and they will understand on which point they are staying, and thus the service problem that the company is facing can be tackled, because everyone would like to have more points, more credit ratings, so that they don't get laid off suddenly. This is not a sudden program. This is a gradually transforming program for my whole servicing crews to gain a better service, give a better service outcome. And also in this phase, we will initiate the crisis management department, because since we are diversifying our business model, our service opportunities, we need to understand and also keep a close look on everything that we are trying to propose. Further will be continued by Mahela.
Okay, now in the third phase, we are actually running into the sustain stage. This will start after the 4 years of our plan of action. The objective of this stage was to establish an expansion and also to flourish our market growth. Now, here we are proposing that we are going into a new concern, which is called the Cathay X, which will be actually a LCC concern, which is actually the low cost carrier model. Now, there are two reasons why we are doing this. First reason is all the competitors are doing. In the long run, if you have to sustain in the long run, if you need to lower our operating cost, we must go there. And the other reason is there is a distinguishable positioning impact in our customers' mind, because many people think that Cathay Pacific is actually a premium brand, whereas service are not provided. So we are actually encouraging a new concern, which is called Cathay X, that will be targeted to the different segments. Now, how it will be continued? It will be continued in the different domestical positions. Like it will be, we will be creating a joint venture into different countries, and the operation will be done through domestically, only in domestically. So the country-wise independent line will be continued, and as a result, what will happen that we will be able to know all the operation activities, operation cost variables. We'll be able to know all of these things in those domestic areas. So other than that, we also like to hedge the country-wise oil price. into different regions. The regions where we are selecting Cathay X to operate. Now this will happen, this will enable us to initiate different hedging proceedings and different options to choose in the near future. Now when the macroeconomical macro-environmental crisis happens, just like 2015, there was oil price dimension. So what happened there? There was a huge hedging loss for them. Now while we are running towards the Cathay X, there will be different oil price for the different countries. So there will be more options for the Cathay X, Cathay Group to operate here. Now there are three things we are actually gaining from here. Multiple oil sourcing, there will be business diversity, and also there will be some, we will be reducing some macroeconomical risk. Now, in the last phase, since this is a new concept, there will be independent crisis management department in the different regions. Now, in the crisis management department, there will be three teams actually: monitoring department, disaster recovery team, and also the contingency team. Moving on to the next phase, the monitoring team. This will be the monitoring criteria they will be looking for: the growth rate, the churn rate, the lost customers, what we will have to achieve. Also the conversion rate of the our campaigns, and also the customer retention. And the tools we will have to use, like financial statements, KPIs, also the churn control management, and also the customer feedback, because the customer retention is a big part for Cathay Pacific. Moving on, we have identified some risks in the short run, and we also identified some risks in the long run, and the possibilities are there in the written. In the short run, government regulation, volatile cost drivers, and adaptability will be a huge challenge for Cathay Pacific, and the chances will be medium, low, and high prospectively. And in the long run, disruptive innovation, as it is written in the case, would be a huge challenge. Also, the foreign currency movement is also be a high challenge, and it will be affecting highly. Now, moving on, this is the contingency plan. Now, if everything goes apart in our plan of action, or in any phase there is a problem, this is the contingency plan we would like to happen. Which is rebrand Cathay as a LCC airline globally. Now we have mentioned in the third phase, after achieving the operating cost, after achieving the success. But if we failing to do that in the first phase or second phase, we will be directly going for the LCC airline globally. And the risks what will be averted would be the disruptive innovation, and also some of the volatile macroeconomic effects. Moving on, the big picture what we would like to achieve is that our company, Cathay Pacific, would be an operationally solvent company perceived as a customer and also employee-centric brand throughout the globe. And we think that this thing can be achievable, and this can be proper justified because it has the profitability. We have achieved in the operational cost in the first phase, and also in the second phase we have achieved the success, and in the third phase we have achieved the sustainability.
It is acceptable because our strategy is in alignment with the desired positioning.
It is feasible because the proposed plan falls into proper timeline and has the objectives fulfilled.
It is also sustainable because we have tackled the operating costs and also given you a proper long-term planning of how to sustain and also look into the macroeconomic effects.
Thank you, everyone.
This is Team Bangladesh.
We're open to questions
We're
now.
open for questions.
Yeah, I don't mind starting with a question on the strategy. So I think on your first slide, you outlined that the strategy was the problem. And then at this very last slide, you talked about actually that the default strategy would be an LCC solution.
This is actually a contingency plan in case everything else that we have suggested falls apart and doesn't work. What we are suggesting is, given that the brand reputation has completely fallen apart, this is a contingency plan that we're suggesting, because the current reputation of the company, as we can see, is that the customers are saying that they're not being able to provide as much as they're claiming. So as such, we have suggested them to move on to LCC in case nothing else works out.
And if we go to the cause and effect slide, do you think that the strategy, the lack of strategy, is what's causing those problems, or is it that the causes is resulting? So to me, there wasn't quite a clear. So is there a clear link between what your end strategy is and therefore what the problems are, or is it that the you're trying to rectify the problems to fix the strategy?
What happens is we have actually discussed the causes that are ultimately leading to the effect that they're not being able to design a strategy, a proper strategy, because we see that there are so many causes. In fact, too many causes for one company. This is what's leading to a problem regarding prioritization as to which one they should do first, which one they should do after. So these are the causes that are ultimately leading to one effect, and all the solutions that we are proposing are basically solving the causes that we mentioned.
If I may add to that, we see from the case that the industry itself is having a very small amount of profit percentage, only 5%. And this was a macroeconomic effect. And also we see another problem in the macroeconomic level, that the oil price is actually fluctuating, and this company failing to do a proper R&D is also being harmed by their wrong hedging of the oil prices. And one or two problems. And also again we see that the quality of the services are not being met. So there are a lot of issues that need to be actually acknowledged.
Too many.
So for that, we actually derived a proper strategy that will look into the fact that the airline industry is moving. We are acknowledging that also, and the hedging of the oil price has been a problem. We cannot say that every time, for the next time we hedge, it will be okay. We cannot actually claim that. So that's why we actually brought up different sources of oils, so that if one of my hedging goes wrong, I can actually take oil from the non-hedged sourcings. So to tackle that, and also for the service area, that is our internal problem of the company, that is also being acknowledged through the crew credit system.
So you've talked a fair bit about the hedging being wrong. So what exactly was wrong about it? And in your proposal of country-wise hedging, ultimately, how would you go about deriving what the optimal hedging ratio should be?
So what we see from the case is that they hedged with the supplier. Hedging actually happens in the beginning of the year with a forecasting of the year-end prices. So what we propose is that it is difficult to actually forecast in a global scale. That's why when we actually introduce our country-wise Cathay X domestic airline network, we have sourcing of oils from each of the countries. And when I have actually sourcing from each of the countries, it is more easier to understand the fluctuation in that country, the sourcing of the oil. So even if I hedge the oil price from a Malaysian source, I can have options in my Singaporean source and also in my Hong Kong source. So we are actually giving many sources for them, so that if in the next time they have a wrong hedging problem, they can actually get a solution from other sources.
Is this implicit on an assumption that each country has sufficient oil and enough sources? Ultimately, there would be many countries that ultimately import, and to a large extent, the global oil price is what sort of sets a floor.
We mentioned in the first stage, the survey stage, that we are going to initiate the R&D department. So that will be primarily, we will work with that. We will work with every country, try to understand their demographic and economic activities, and that will help us to gain more information about the hedging and which country has opportunities, which country we should enter and should not enter.
And also, sir, if I may add that since every country has airports, and every airport has a network and connectivity with all the possible sourcing of oils, and everyone has different dealers. So through that, we will actually have a vast network of potential suppliers of oil. So that's how we are trying to increase the network of our possible sources of receiving oil.
You mentioned about Cathay X as a domestic, and then the longer term I heard was a strategy towards a low-cost carrier strategy for Cathay as a whole, right? Have you considered what the impact is from the competition? Because there's quite a bit of competition in that area.
If I may make a correction, we did not suggest LCC for the longer term. Rather, we suggested that the entire company would be branded as an LCC in case everything else goes wrong, this is the contingency plan. The X that we have,
The third phase.
the X that we have mentioned is basically the LCC,
Right.
the low-cost carrier plane.
See, what we wanted to suggest is, since we have identified that the airline industry is actually very moving, fluctuating, and the competitive advantage is very low here, and everyone is shifting to being more cost effective. So to sustain in that airline industry, that was our last phase, to sustain in that we must have a diverse business portfolio. We cannot actually say that Cathay Pacific would like to be only a premium brand. So for that we have diversified the business portfolio, bringing out 2 different brands. That is, from the case we also see that the brand positioning among the minds of our customers was not up to the mark, because the company wanted to promote themselves as a premium brand, but the people weren't receiving that. So we are actually distinguishing between the brands, that is Cathay Pacific, the premium one, and also Cathay X, the economy one. So in the economy scale, which is the LCC model, through that we are only entering into the domestic airports for short haul flights, so that we can better understand the entire global scaling of LCC competitions. You have mentioned that the competition is very high there. That's why we want to have a regional head office in every country that we want to operate, and under that we will be operating understanding that country's own sizing of business and scaling of business.
So what is your optimal mix between the low cost and premium brands? So I understand that rebranding into LCC is only a contingency. So in your primary base case
So what we're
option.
saying, I think there has been a confusion regarding this. We did in the third phase, in the sustain phase, we mentioned that this is going to be another brand that will be launched, which is Cathay X. This is something that we are suggesting, regardless of whether it's.
I understand.
This is not a contingency.
So what is going to be
The contingency
mix?
was that if everything goes wrong, we will only go on with LCC. We won't be in the premium market.
I understand.
That was
My question is in your base case. So if your strategy does succeed, where will you eventually land up in terms of your optimal mix of between low cost and premium, between Cathay X and the premium Cathay?
So if I may clarify your question, if all of our strategies go according to our plan, where do we stand?
Or what is
the
where you want to get to
What will
in,
be
in your novel?
Yeah. So what we want to achieve through that is basically we have a different set of premium service line and also an economy line. Whichever you want to avail, you will have to pay that amount of money, because in the short run we are actually trying to cope up with the operating costs, but when we have actually steadied ourselves, then we will have a different line and given portfolio that whatever you want to achieve, we have something to offer you. We have something to offer each segment of the customers, and also to tackle our internal internal organizational conflicts regarding our R&D, hedging, and also our service offerings. We have also tackled that within the first 2 parts, so that
Sure. If I might clarify. So for you as Cathay management,
Yeah.
let's say, given where you are now versus your mix between low cost and premium, what is the mix that you want to get to, and why do you think that is the optimal mix?
So here's the thing, that in the third phase, what we are suggesting that we will go for Cathay X. Now, in the beginning of that stage, what we are providing is we have to do the joint venture in the domestic flights. So after joining with the domestic flights, so there will be a new venture for them, and there will be using they might be using their airlines to operate at that level.
Okay,
So-
what share of revenues will that bring to the group? What's your forecast?
so you are actually trying to so your question is basically where we want to emphasize, the premium ones or the LCC ones?
Yeah, so I want to understand from your
Where's your-
revenue share and profit share between the premium Cathay and Cathay X, if basically that's your strategy,
See,
what is going to be the breakdown?
See, here is the best thing about this, a diversified business portfolio, that being the Cathay management, I actually have the flexibility to understand where this industry is moving and what are the demands of my customers right now. Since we have seen from the case that the industry is fluctuating, so we can actually make 5 to 10 years of plan among where I want to emphasize. See, through Airbus, AirAsia, without even having a Boeing, they can actually provide premium service through Airbuses. So we can actually emphasize on the R&D and see where the industry is moving, and then emphasize on will we provide premium more, or will we have enough premium airlines and
Sure,
enough
I understand this.
LCC.
Can I ask a separate? I'm sort of checking. I want to ask a separate question. How did you evaluate your solutions? Like, how did you evaluate to go for capacity versus different types of planes?
Can I
How did you evaluate your solutions? How did you decide that seat capacity was more important than plane selection? As an example.
In the first phase, what our objective was to reduce the operating cost. Now we have seen in the exhibits that if you go for the 10-seaters, we can reduce 15% of the total cost. AirAsia has already done that. So in the first phase, what our objective was to reduce the operating cost by certain activities. So what we are suggesting in the by two types of seating arrangements, that in the XL ones and also the normal ones. So in the normal one, we can reduce a certain part of operating cost. So that was actually the rationale of arrangement of the 10-seaters.
Why did you choose that as a solution rather than changing the different types of planes? I want to understand a bit more about how you evaluated your alternatives.
Yeah, ma'am. See, they wanted to actually hold the premium look, but the competitors were actually moving into the economy classes, providing 10 seats in a row. So they actually needed to tackle the operating cost, and laying off isn't the way we think that this should be tackled through that. So what we are proposing, we actually brought up the cost drivers that are enhancing the operating costs. So the cost drivers had that the maintenance cost, and also to tackle that operating cost, we actually wanted to provide two different segments of options, so that the brand positioning that they wanted to provide also stays there, and also we become more cost effective by halving our operating costs in two different cabins.
One quick question.
Yeah.
Last question. What happens to Cafe Dragon?
See, in the long run, what we are proposing is that one remains in the premium brand segment,
That is
and
Cathay Dragon.
that can be Cathay Pacific or Cathay Dragon one premium segment, and the other economy segment will be Cathay X, because through Cathay Dragon, what happened is we see from the case that there was a misalignment of the positioning among the customers' minds. So we want to actually give a proper positioning of the brands, so only two different segments of brands will remain